There is a quiet paradox in the human body. For most of human history, reaching the age of 30 did not mark the beginning of decline. It marked survival. It meant the body had already endured cold nights, long distances, uncertain food, and the slow pressure of time. And yet today, many people begin to feel weaker not long after that same point, as if strength fades not from use, but from something missing. The body itself has not changed quickly enough to explain this. So the question becomes less about aging and more about absence. What has been removed from the conditions that once carried human strength forward beyond 30, and why can't you stay strong after 30? Somewhere, after the age of 30, many people begin to notice a quiet change in their body. It does not arrive all at once, and it does not always have a clear cause. Movements that once felt natural begin to require more attention. Recovery takes a little longer. Strength does not disappear, but it feels less stable, as if it must be rebuilt again and again instead of simply remaining. This experience is often described as the beginning of decline, a gradual turning point where the body begins to lose what it once had. But this explanation, while familiar, may not be complete. The idea that the human body is designed to steadily weaken after a certain age assumes that aging alone is the primary force shaping strength. Yet the human body did not emerge in conditions where age could be separated from environment. For most of human history, reaching 30 did not place a person into a stage of quiet physical reduction. It placed them into a stage where the body had already adapted to ongoing demands, and where those demands did not suddenly disappear. In that earlier context, strength was not something that peaked and then faded in isolation. It was something that was constantly engaged, constantly challenged, and constantly required to respond. The body was not maintaining strength in the absence of pressure, but within it. When the environment continued to require movement, lifting, carrying, and adjustment, the body continued to respond in kind. The sense of decline that many people feel today after 30 may therefore reflect a different kind of change, one that is not located entirely within the body itself. Instead of asking why the body begins to weaken, it may be more precise to ask what has been removed from the conditions that once kept strength in place. This shift in perspective moves the focus away from age as an isolated factor and toward the relationship between the body and its surroundings. When that relationship changes, the body may appear to change as well, even if its underlying design remains largely the same. To understand this more clearly, it is necessary to step back and consider the longer timeline of human life. The human body developed under conditions that did not include stable comfort, predictable movement patterns, or extended periods of physical inactivity. Strength was not preserved through rest alone, but through repeated use in varied and often uncertain environments. Each day required adjustments to terrain, temperature, and available resources. The body responded not to a fixed routine, but to a shifting set of challenges that prevented any single system from remaining idle for long. In that context, reaching 30 did not mean that the body began to lose its capacity. It meant that the body had already passed through years of continuous adaptation and was still expected to continue. There was no clear boundary where one stage ended and another began. Instead, there was a continuation of the same pattern, shaped by external demands rather than internal timelines. In contrast, many modern environments introduce a different structure. Movement can become optional rather than necessary. Physical effort can be concentrated into short periods instead of distributed across the day. The body may spend long stretches without being required to respond to variation. Over time, this change in pattern can alter the way strength is experienced. Without regular and varied engagement, the systems that support strength may become less consistent, not because they are failing, but because they are not being called upon in the same way. The feeling of instability that appears after 30 may therefore arise from a mismatch between what the body expects and what the environment provides. The body continues to operate according to patterns shaped over a much longer period of human history, while the surrounding conditions no longer supply the same signals. This creates a subtle gap, one that is not immediately visible but can be felt in the way strength no longer seems to hold itself in place. Instead, it becomes something that must be reactivated, something that fades more quickly when not used. Seen from this perspective, the experience of becoming weaker after 30 is not only a story about aging, it is also a story about absence, about the gradual removal of conditions that once sustained a continuous relationship between the body and its environment, a relationship that began long before the age of 30 and was never meant to end there. The feeling that strength becomes less reliable after 30 often appears in small, almost unnoticeable ways. It may begin as a slight hesitation before lifting something that once felt light, or a longer pause needed after a familiar movement. There is no clear moment when strength is lost, only a gradual sense that it no longer holds itself as steadily as before. This subtle shift is usually interpreted as a natural outcome of aging, as if the body follows a fixed internal schedule that slowly reduces its capacity over time. Yet this interpretation depends on a certain assumption, the idea that strength is something the body is meant to preserve in a stable form, independent of how it is used. When this assumption is examined more closely, it begins to lose its clarity. The human body did not develop under conditions where strength could remain unchanged without continuous engagement. Instead, strength functioned as a response, something that emerged through interaction with the environment rather than existing as a stored reserve. In earlier human settings, the body was rarely separated from physical demand for long periods. Movement was not structured into isolated sessions, but spread across the day in different forms, some slow, some sudden, some requiring balance, others requiring force. The body adjusted constantly, not only maintaining strength but reshaping it in response to variation. This meant that strength was not experienced as something that needed to be protected from loss, but as something that was repeatedly renewed through use. When this pattern is removed or reduced, the experience of strength begins to change. Without frequent signals that require the body to adapt, the systems involved in maintaining strength may become less responsive, not because they have reached a limit, but because they are no longer being asked to operate in the same way. The result is not an immediate decline, but a gradual reduction in consistency. Strength may still appear during moments of effort, but it no longer remains available in the same effortless manner. This can create the impression that the body has become weaker, even if its underlying structure has not significantly changed. To understand this shift more clearly, it is helpful to consider how early human life maintained a constant connection between effort and necessity. Tasks such as walking over uneven ground, carrying materials, or adjusting to changing weather were not optional activities. They were embedded in daily survival, requiring the body to remain prepared for a range of physical demands. There was no extended period where the body could remain inactive without consequence. This continuous engagement created a form of stability that did not rely on rest alone, but on the regular activation of multiple systems working together. In modern environments, this pattern is often interrupted. The body may spend long stretches in positions that require minimal adjustment, followed by short periods of concentrated effort. This creates a different rhythm, one where strength is not continuously integrated into daily activity, but separated from it. Over time, this separation can lead to a feeling that strength is less dependable, appearing only when deliberately activated rather than existing as a constant background state. The experience that follows is often described in terms of loss, but it may be more accurate to describe it as a change in how strength is expressed. Instead of being sustained through ongoing interaction with the environment, it becomes something that must be intentionally maintained, and therefore more easily interrupted. This shift becomes more noticeable after 30, not necessarily because the body changes suddenly at that age, but because the cumulative effects of altered patterns begin to appear more clearly. The body continues to respond to what it encounters, but the range and frequency of those encounters have changed. As a result, the sense of strength as something stable gives way to a sense of strength as something conditional. This does not mean that the body is failing. It means that the conditions required to sustain a certain experience of strength are no longer consistently present, and the body is adapting to that absence in ways that are felt but not always fully understood. As this quiet change continues, the body begins to feel less like a system that carries strength forward on its own, and more like something that must be reminded. There is a growing sense that strength no longer stays in place unless it is actively called upon. This feeling can be difficult to describe, because it does not always appear as weakness in a clear or measurable way. Instead, it appears as inconsistency. On some days, the body responds easily, almost as it once did. On other days, the same movements feel heavier, less certain, as if something has shifted just beneath the surface. This variability is often taken as further evidence that the body is entering a stage of decline, yet it may point to something else, something that has less to do with the passage of time and more to do with the structure of daily life. The human body did not develop in environments where its systems could remain inactive for long stretches and then suddenly be expected to perform at full capacity. It developed in conditions where low-level engagement was nearly constant, where even periods of rest were shaped by the surrounding environment, by temperature, by the need to adjust position, by the absence of complete stillness. In such settings, strength was not something that had to be summoned after inactivity. It was something that remained close to the surface, because the body was never entirely removed from the conditions that required it. This continuous proximity to physical demand created a form of readiness that did not depend on deliberate effort. The body was already in motion, already adapting, already maintaining a connection between its systems and the world around it. When this connection becomes less consistent, the sense of readiness can begin to fade. The body may still be capable of producing strength, but it does not remain in a state where that strength is easily accessible at all times. Instead, there is a delay, a need to re-engage systems that have not been used in the same way. This delay can be experienced as a loss, even if the underlying capacity has not disappeared. Over time, this pattern can create a new perception of the body, one where strength feels temporary rather than continuous, something that must be rebuilt instead of something that quietly endures. This perception is reinforced by the rhythms of modern environments, where physical effort is often separated from the rest of daily life. Periods of movement are followed by long intervals of stillness, and the body adjusts accordingly. It becomes efficient at conserving energy during inactivity, but less practiced at maintaining a steady baseline of engagement. This efficiency, while useful in certain contexts, may contribute to the feeling that strength fades more quickly than it once did. Looking back across the longer span of human history, the idea of strength as something that needs to be preserved in isolation becomes less central. What appears instead is a pattern of continuous interaction, where the body remains connected to a range of small demands that together sustain its function. There is no clear boundary between activity and rest, only a shifting balance between different forms of engagement. In that setting, the body does not need to hold on to strength in the same way, because it is constantly using it, constantly renewing it through varied movement and adjustment. The contrast with modern experience becomes clearer when this pattern is considered. The body has not lost its ability to respond, but it is no longer surrounded by the same conditions that kept that response active throughout the day. After 30, this difference may become more noticeable, not because a new process begins, but because the accumulation of these changes reaches a point where it can be felt more directly. The sense that strength cannot be held onto is not simply a reflection of time passing, but a reflection of how the body is now positioned within its environment. It remains capable, but less continuously engaged, still responsive, but no longer sustained by the same steady presence of demand that once shaped its behavior over much longer periods of human life. To understand why the feeling of strength changes after 30, it becomes necessary to step away from the present and look toward a much longer human timeline, one in which reaching 30 did not carry the same meaning it does today. In many earlier human environments, the years leading up to that age were marked by uncertainty. Survival depended on navigating conditions that were not stable, not predictable, and not easily controlled. Food sources could vary, weather could shift, and movement across the landscape was often required without clear boundaries. Within this context, the body was not moving toward a stage of decline as it approached 30. Instead, it was moving through a period of continuous adjustment, shaped by the need to respond to changing demands. When a person reached that point, it did not signal that the body had begun to lose its strength. It suggested that the body had already passed through a range of pressures and had adapted in ways that allowed it to continue. This does not mean that early human life was easier or that strength was guaranteed to remain unchanged. It means that strength was not understood as something separate from the conditions that produced it. The body was part of a system in which effort and necessity were closely linked. Movement was not optional, and the absence of movement was not a neutral state. It could carry consequences that required immediate correction. As a result, the body remained in a state of ongoing interaction with its surroundings, and this interaction shaped how strength was experienced over time. Rather than building toward a peak and then declining, Strength existed within a pattern of use that did not pause long enough to allow that kind of separation. The idea of maintaining strength without continuous engagement would not have aligned with the conditions in which the human body developed. When viewed from this perspective, the age of 30 becomes less of a biological turning point and more of a marker within a longer process. It represents a stage where the body has already demonstrated its ability to respond to repeated demands, not a stage where those demands suddenly disappear. The environment continued to require effort beyond that age, and the body continued to meet those requirements in the ways it had learned. There was no clear moment where the body was expected to shift into a state of reduced function. Instead, the same patterns of movement, adjustment, and response continued, shaped by the same external conditions. This continuity is important because it highlights a difference between past and present experiences of strength. In earlier contexts, the body was rarely removed from the processes that sustained it. There was no extended period where strength could exist without being used, because the environment did not allow for that separation. In contrast, many modern environments create spaces where the body can remain inactive without immediate consequence. This changes the relationship between effort and necessity, and over time it changes the way strength is perceived. The body may still retain the capacity for strength, but it is no longer required to express it continuously. This can create the impression that strength fades after a certain age, when in fact the pattern of engagement has shifted. The difference becomes clearer when considering how the body responds to consistent versus intermittent demand. In earlier settings, demand was often distributed across the day in varied forms. Walking, carrying, adjusting to terrain, and responding to changes in temperature created a constant background of activity. The body did not rely on isolated moments of effort, but on a steady flow of interaction that kept its systems active. This kind of pattern does not easily lead to a sudden sense of decline, because there is no clear boundary between active and inactive states. Strength remains part of the ongoing process rather than something that appears and disappears. As the human timeline moves forward into more stable and controlled environments, this pattern begins to shift. The body encounters longer periods where movement is reduced, where physical effort is concentrated into specific times rather than spread across the day. This alters the way strength is maintained, making it more dependent on deliberate action rather than continuous engagement. After 30, the effects of this shift may become more noticeable, not because the body has changed its design, but because the conditions that once supported that design are no longer present in the same form. The experience of strength, shaped by a long history of interaction with demanding environments, begins to feel different when those demands are removed or reduced. What remains is not a body that has suddenly become weaker, but a body that is no longer held in the same pattern of use that once carried its strength forward without interruption. In a world where reaching 30 meant continued survival rather than quiet withdrawal, strength would have carried a different meaning from the one many people imagine today. It was not simply the ability to lift something heavy or to appear powerful for a short moment. It was the capacity to keep participating in the demands of life after the body had already spent many years being tested by distance, weather, food uncertainty, injury, childbirth, labor, and repeated fatigue. This does not mean every person lived the same way, or that every early human body was strong in the same form. Human groups lived across many landscapes, and the conditions around them could differ greatly. But across much of the long human past, the body was more directly tied to the practical tasks that allowed people to continue living. Strength was not a separate achievement. It was woven into walking, carrying, balancing, digging, gathering, making shelter, tending fires, holding children, moving through uneven ground, and responding to conditions that did not wait for comfort. Under those circumstances, a person beyond 30 was not stepping out of usefulness. In many human societies, age brought accumulated skill, memory of places, knowledge of materials, and experience with danger. The body may have carried wear, but it also carried practice. This is an important distinction, because modern thinking often treats strength as something that should remain untouched by use, like a supply stored safely inside the body. In the deeper history of our species, strength was more likely shaped by use itself. The repeated demands of daily life did not preserve the body in a perfect state, but they kept its systems involved, Muscles, tendons, joints, balance, breathing, and coordination were not isolated from ordinary existence. They were repeatedly called into service in small and large ways. After 30, this meant the body had not simply survived time, it had survived through patterns of activity that continued to matter. The idea of decline, therefore, cannot be understood without asking what kind of life surrounds the body. A body that still must move across ground, manage load, adjust to cold, and respond to uncertainty receives different signals from a body surrounded by smooth floors, chairs, vehicles, steady temperature, and predictable food. This contrast should not be turned into a romantic image of the past. Earlier life often involved pain, risk, disease, and loss. But for the question of strength, it shows something precise. The body's abilities were historically maintained inside necessity. They were not maintained apart from it. When necessity changed, the meaning of strength changed as well. Today, after 30, many people feel that strength begins to require planning. It must be scheduled, protected, recovered, and deliberately rebuilt. In older environments, many forms of strength were not scheduled in the same way, because they were already embedded in survival. This difference alters the emotional meaning of age. In the present, 30 can feel like the point where the body begins to resist life. In a longer human timeline, 30 may have been closer to the point where the body had already been shaped by life and was still being asked to continue. That does not make the past safer or better. It simply makes the modern feeling of weakness less mysterious. If strength depends on repeated signals from the world, then a world with fewer signals will slowly change the body's response. The loss may be quiet, because nothing dramatic has happened. No single day removes strength. No single year explains the change. The body only receives less of what once kept it alert, prepared, and integrated with the demands around it. The question of why strength fades after 30, therefore, begins to move away from the calendar and toward the environment. Age still matters, because biological systems do change over time. But age does not act alone. It acts through the life that surrounds it, through the movements that are repeated, the pressures that remain, and the demands that disappear. Seen this way, 30 is not a hard wall in the body. It is a place where the modern environment begins to reveal what it has quietly stopped asking the body to do. The deeper meaning of 30 becomes clearer when it is seen not as an isolated birthday, but as a point inside a chain of survival, memory, and continued responsibility. In the modern imagination, 30 often stands near the edge of youth, a place where the body is expected to begin giving back what it once had. But in the longer human story, reaching that age could also mean that a person had already crossed many of the most dangerous thresholds of life. Childhood had been survived, repeated seasons had been endured. The body had learned the terrain around it through direct contact, through walking, carrying, bending, climbing, waiting, and recovering. This does not mean early adulthood was safe or that bodies beyond 30 were free from pain. It means that the body's strength existed within a continuing relationship with the world, not as a separate possession that was slowly being drained by time. In many older ways of living, a person beyond 30 might have carried more wear, but also more practiced coordination. The hands knew materials, the feet knew uneven ground, the back had learned loads, the eyes had learned distance, weather, and small changes in the landscape. These are not romantic details. They simply point to a different kind of strength, one that was not only muscular, but practical, distributed, and built through repetition. In that setting, strength after 30 was not a clean, fresh strength. It was a used strength, shaped by years of demand. It may have been marked by old injuries, stiffness, or fatigue, yet it was still tied to daily usefulness. This distinction matters because the modern body often lives in a world where many of those daily demands have been softened, removed, or separated into chosen activity. A person may still work hard, but the work may not ask the whole body to remain involved in the same varied way. The ground is often flat, temperature is often controlled, food is often available without physical travel, loads are often moved by tools, machines, or systems beyond the body. The body is protected from many risks, which is a real human achievement, but it is also removed from many signals that once kept strength close to daily life. After 30, this removal can begin to feel like a personal failure, because the body no longer seems to hold strength without being reminded. Yet from the perspective of human origins, the body may simply be responding honestly to a quieter environment. It reduces what is not repeatedly required. It becomes efficient at the life it is actually living. This is why the feeling of weakness after 30 can be so confusing. The body is not necessarily announcing a sudden collapse. It may be showing the slow result of a life where strength has fewer natural reasons to stay constantly present. Earlier human bodies were not protected from decline, but they were surrounded by demands that kept many systems in use for as long as life required them. The modern body, by contrast, may reach 30 with fewer years of varied movement behind it, fewer unavoidable loads, fewer cold mornings, fewer long walks across uneven places, and fewer ordinary tasks that quietly train balance, grip, endurance, and coordination. The difference is not only biological, it is historical. It is the difference between a body shaped by necessity and a body living inside comfort that no longer speaks the same language. This does not make comfort wrong. It makes the question deeper. If the human body once carried strength forward because the world kept asking for it, then the modern loss of strength after 30 may not be only about what time takes away. It may also be about what the surrounding world no longer gives back. The age remains the same number, but the meaning around it has changed. 30 once stood inside a landscape of continued demand. Now, for many people, it stands inside a quieter life where the body must choose what it once could not avoid, and that choice changes the way strength is felt over time. If the body once reached 30 inside a world of continued demand, then the next question is not only what age does to strength, but what the body expects the world to keep asking of it. The human body is not a closed object that ages in silence. It is a living system that has always taken instructions from its surroundings. Ground, weather, distance, weight, hunger, and fatigue all speak to the body in a language older than conscious thought. They do not explain themselves, but they shape how muscles are used, how joints are loaded, how balance is trained, and how energy is spent. In the long human past, these signals did not disappear when youth ended. A person who had passed through early adulthood was still surrounded by terrain, seasons, tools, children, shelters, fires, animals, plants, and the ordinary physical work of staying alive. The body was not being asked to remain strong as an abstract goal. It was being asked to continue participating in a real environment. That difference matters, because strength is easier to understand when it has a purpose. A hand that grips, a back that carries, a foot that adjusts to uneven ground, and a breathing rhythm that settles after walking all belong to a body that expects repetition. Not perfect repetition, but repeated contact with the world. Modern life often changes this quietly. It does not remove all effort, but it removes much of the background demand that once trained the body without being named. A person may still feel busy, tired, even overwhelmed, yet the body may not receive the same wide range of physical signals. Sitting can replace squatting, vehicles can replace walking, smooth floors can replace irregular ground, indoor temperature can replace cold air and heat, and soft surfaces can replace the small adjustments once required by earth, stone, wood, and grass. These changes are not moral failures. They are part of human protection, invention, and comfort. But comfort also changes the conversation between body and world. After 30, the body may still be waiting for a level of daily engagement that no longer arrives. It may still carry ancient expectations for movement spread throughout the day, for changing loads, for posture that shifts often, for feet that read the ground, for arms and hands that do useful work, for effort that appears in small pieces rather than one scheduled moment. When those expectations are not met, strength does not vanish in one event. It becomes less practiced. It becomes less immediate. It becomes something that must be summoned from a body that has spent too many hours receiving the opposite message. This is why the feeling after 30 can seem unfair. The mind may still expect the body to be ready, because nothing obvious has happened. There may be no injury, no dramatic illness, no single turning point, but the body has been listening to years of signals. If the world asks for stillness, the body becomes more efficient at stillness. If the world asks for short bursts and long pauses, the body adapts to that rhythm. If the world no longer requires strength in ordinary tasks, strength becomes less ordinary. In earlier human settings, the body could not fully separate strength from daily life. The distance to water, the need to gather fuel, the care of children, the making and moving of shelter, the shifting of camp or workplace, and the simple fact of walking across natural ground all kept the body in conversation with necessity. These demands varied across cultures and landscapes, and no single image can represent every human past. But the broader pattern is clear enough. For most of our species' history, the body's strength was maintained inside use, not outside it. The modern body often lives after 30 with a strange contradiction. It is safer than many bodies before it, but less physically addressed by the world. It is protected from many dangers, yet also separated from many ordinary pressures that once kept its systems awake. The body still expects more than comfort, not because suffering is good, but because movement, load, balance, temperature, and effort were once part of the normal grammar of being human. When that grammar becomes quiet, strength after 30 can begin to feel like a language the body remembers, but does not hear often enough to speak fluently. One of the quietest changes in modern life is not simply that the body moves less, but that the timing of movement has become unnatural to the way human strength was once maintained. The body did not develop around a clean division between work and rest, effort and comfort, exercise and non-exercise. For most of the long human past, physical demand was distributed through the day in uneven pieces. A person might walk, pause, carry, bend, reach, sit near the ground, rise again, hold a tool, brace against wind, adjust a slope, and then rest in a posture that still required small muscular effort. The body did not receive one large instruction and then silence. It received many small instructions spaced across time. These signals mattered because strength is not kept alive only by intense moments. It is also kept alive by frequency, by the repeated reminder that the body still belongs to a world of weight, distance, friction, and balance. After 30, when many people begin to feel that strength no longer remains steady, part of the reason may lie in this missing rhythm. The modern day often asks the body to be still for long periods, then suddenly asks it to be strong for a brief task. A chair holds the hips, a backrest holds the spine, a vehicle carries the legs, a screen gathers the eyes and hands into a narrow space. Then, after hours of low demand, the body is expected to lift, climb stairs, exercise, carry bags, or recover quickly from a movement it has not been gently prepared to make. The result can feel like aging, because the body responds with stiffness, delay, or fatigue. But it is also a timing problem. The body is being asked to perform strength without the long chain of small preparations that once came before it. In earlier human settings, those preparations were not planned. They were built into life. Uneven ground asked the ankles and feet to adjust again and again. Low shelters, fires, tools, children, plants, stones, water, and food preparation asked the hands, knees, back, and shoulders to change position. Rest itself was often closer to the ground, meaning that standing up was not always a simple upward motion from a raised seat, but a whole body transition involving balance and control. These details should not be exaggerated into a single picture of the past, because human groups lived in many ways. Still, the general pattern remains useful. The body was frequently interrupted by the world. It could not drift too long into complete physical silence. That interruption may have helped keep strength close to ordinary awareness. Modern comfort often removes the interruption. It smooths the ground, raises the seat, warms the room, stores the food nearby, and reduces the number of times the body must change levels or carry uneven loads. These are valuable protections, but they also reduce the small daily signals that remind the body to maintain readiness. After 30, the absence becomes more visible because the body has had enough years to adapt to the quiet. It has learned the rhythm it is given. If the rhythm is long stillness followed by sudden effort, then strength may feel unreliable. If the rhythm is narrow movement repeated for years, then other movements may feel strangely unfamiliar. This is why the question cannot be answered only by saying that the body gets older. Age is real, but it acts through patterns. A body that receives many small physical signals across the day ages inside one kind of relationship with the world. A body that receives few of them ages inside another. The human body still carries a deep expectation for scattered demand, not because it needs danger, but because its systems were shaped in a world where the day itself kept calling them back. When that call becomes too rare, strength after 30 can begin to feel distant, not gone, but no longer woven naturally into the hours that carry the body from morning to night. There is another layer to what the body expects after 30, one that is less visible than movement or timing, but just as persistent. It is the expectation of variation, the quiet assumption that the world will not remain the same from one moment to the next. The human body was shaped in surroundings where change was ordinary. Ground could shift from soft to hard, from dry to wet, from level to uneven within a short distance. Weather could move from warmth to cold, from still air to wind, without warning. Objects did not come in identical shapes or weights, and the body had to respond to each difference with small adjustments. These variations were not interruptions to life, they were part of its structure. Over time, this constant need to adjust trained the body to remain flexible in its responses. Strength was not only about how much force could be produced, but how easily that force could be adapted to a changing situation. After 30, the absence of this variation can begin to leave a mark. Many modern environments are designed to reduce unpredictability. Surfaces are made even, objects are standardized, temperatures are controlled, and daily routines can become highly consistent. This stability brings safety and efficiency, but it also reduces the number of small corrections the body is asked to make. When the same movements are repeated in the same way, the body becomes more specialized in those patterns and less practiced in others. Strength, in this sense, becomes narrower. It may remain present in familiar tasks, but less available when something unexpected appears. This narrowing can be felt as a loss, even if the body still holds significant capacity. The feeling that strength cannot be kept after 30 may therefore include a loss of adaptability, not only a loss of force. In earlier human contexts, adaptability was continuously reinforced. Walking did not happen on a single kind of surface. Carrying did not involve identical loads. Rest did not always occur in the same posture. The body was repeatedly asked to solve small physical problems without preparation. These repeated adjustments did not guarantee that the body would remain unchanged with age, but they kept its systems connected to a wide range of responses. After 30, when modern life offers fewer of these variations, the body may begin to simplify its behavior. It becomes efficient within the patterns it knows, but less ready for those it does not encounter often. This change can make ordinary tasks feel more demanding if they fall outside the usual routine. A sudden need to balance, to reach in an unfamiliar way, or to handle an uneven load can reveal gaps that were not noticeable before. The body has not lost all strength. It has lost some of the conditions that once kept its strength flexible. This is a different kind of change, one that does not always show up in simple measures. It is felt in hesitation, in the need to think before moving, in the sense that the body is no longer quietly prepared for variation. From the perspective of human origins, this is not entirely surprising. The body was never designed to operate in a world where variation could be reduced to such a low level for such long periods of time. It expects difference. It expects to be interrupted by small changes that require adjustment. When those changes are removed, the body adapts by narrowing its responses. After 30, this narrowing becomes easier to notice, not because it begins at that age, but because it has been building through years of repeated sameness. The question of strength therefore extends beyond how much the body can do. It includes how many kinds of situations the body remains ready to handle. In a world with fewer variations, that readiness can slowly diminish, and the experience of strength becomes more fragile, not because the body has reached a fixed limit, but because it is no longer being asked to remain as broadly prepared as it once was. Strength is often imagined as something the body owns, like a resource stored inside muscle and protected from loss. This image is comforting because it makes strength feel like a possession. Once built, it should remain. Once gained, it should stay available. But the human body does not preserve strength in that simple way. It does not keep unused capacity unchanged just because it was useful once. The body is always adjusting to the life it is actually living, and this means strength is closer to a process than a stored state. It has to be renewed through signals, use, loading, balance, and repeated coordination. When those signals become weaker or less frequent, the body does not necessarily collapse. It economizes. It reduces what seems unnecessary. It shifts resources toward the patterns that appear most relevant. This is one reason the feeling of weakness after 30 can be so unsettling. The mind may remember what the body could do, but the body has been quietly responding to what the world has asked of it recently. In the long history of human life, strength was rarely separated from ordinary tasks. It did not need to be saved for special moments, because many forms of effort were already woven into daily survival. A person did not have to decide whether the body should practice walking over uneven ground, carrying weight, rising from low positions, or adjusting to weather. The world made those decisions. The body answered them again and again, and through that answering, strength remained active. This does not mean the past produced perfect bodies. It produced tired bodies, injured bodies, aging bodies, and vulnerable bodies. But those bodies lived in closer contact with the pressures that kept strength involved in life. The process was continuous. Muscles were not only made stronger by heavy effort, they were kept meaningful by regular demand. Joints were not only supported by rest, they were shaped by movement through changing positions. Balance was not a separate skill. It was practiced each time the feet met uneven ground or the body shifted around a load. After 30, this process mattered because the body was not simply expected to hold strength in silence. It was expected to keep using it. Modern life often changes this relationship by turning strength into something planned, measured, and isolated. Instead of being distributed across ordinary movement, it may be placed into a short period of exercise, a weekend task, or an occasional heavy effort. The rest of the day may ask for very little physical adaptation. This creates a strange condition. The body is expected to remain strong in general, while receiving only narrow reminders of why that strength is needed. Over time, strength becomes less like a background quality and more like something that appears only when deliberately summoned. The body still can respond, but the response may feel delayed, uneven, or temporary. This is not because the body has forgotten everything. It is because strength, when separated from continuous use, becomes less deeply integrated into daily life. The human origin of this problem is important. Our bodies were shaped across a long span of time in which energy was valuable, and unused capacity was not maintained without reason. A body that no longer needs a certain level of strength every day has no clear signal to keep that level fully ready. It does what living systems often do. It adapts downward toward the demand it actually receives. That adaptation can be mistaken for pure aging, especially after 30, when people begin watching the body more carefully and noticing small losses with greater concern. But age is not acting alone. It is moving through a body that is constantly reading its environment. If the environment becomes physically quiet, the body may become quieter too. This is why the central question is not only why strength disappears, but why it was once maintained at all. It was maintained because the body lived inside a process that kept calling it into use. When that process weakens, strength becomes harder to keep, not because it was never real, but because it was never meant to remain untouched, unused, and still. A useful way to understand strength is to think of it as a conversation between tissues and demand. Muscle, bone, tendon, balance, and coordination do not exist as separate treasures inside the body. They are maintained through repeated messages. A load sends one message, distance sends another, uneven ground sends another, cold, fatigue, posture, and recovery send still others. The body listens to these messages over long periods of time, and it adjusts itself according to what seems necessary. If the messages remain frequent and varied, the body has reason to keep many systems ready. If the messages become rare, narrow, or predictable, the body has less reason to maintain the same broad readiness. This does not mean the body is making a conscious choice. It means living tissue responds to use and disuse. That principle is widely accepted, and it sits quietly beneath the experience many people describe after 30. The body is not only becoming older, it is also receiving a different set of instructions from the life around it. In the deeper human past, the instructions were rarely silent. A person did not need to invent reasons to carry, walk, reach, balance, kneel, rise, or endure changing conditions. The shape of life provided those reasons. The body was trained by necessity before anyone could call it training. A path across rough ground might ask for ankle control. A load of wood, food, stone, water, or tools might ask the trunk and hands to coordinate. A low resting posture might ask the hips and legs to keep their range. A changing season might ask energy systems to adapt to warmth, cold, hunger, and effort. None of these demands had to be extreme to matter. Their power came from repetition. They returned across days and years, not as a program, but as ordinary life. After 30, this pattern of repeated demand would not necessarily stop. In many historical settings, adults continued to contribute through work, care, movement, memory, and skill. Their bodies carried wear, but wear was not the same as removal from use. The modern body often receives a more divided message. For many hours, it may be told to stay still, supported, warm, and protected. Then, for a short time, it may be asked to be strong, fast, balanced, or resilient. This creates a mismatch between expectation and preparation. The body is asked for an old kind of capacity while being given a new kind of daily signal. It may still produce strength, but it may not hold it as easily. The response can feel like the first edge of decline, because the difference becomes personal. A bag feels heavier. Stairs ask for more attention. A simple movement leaves more fatigue than expected. Yet beneath these moments is not a simple story of failure. It is the body doing what it has always done, adapting to the world it actually meets. From the point of view of human origins, strength was never meant to float above life. It was tied to the friction of living, to the small resistance of the ground, to the weight of useful objects, to the need to shift posture, to the ordinary difficulty of getting through a day without machines doing most of the carrying. When those sources of resistance fade, the body loses not only effort, but information. It receives fewer reminders about what should remain ready. This is why strength after 30 can feel strangely conditional. It is available when rebuilt, practiced, and called for, but it is less likely to stay near the surface without ongoing signals. The body has not betrayed its past. It is still following an ancient rule. What is used with enough regularity is treated as important. What is rarely required becomes easier to reduce. The uncomfortable truth is that strength may fade not because 30 is a sharp biological border, but because by then the body has often spent many years learning a quieter life than the one it was shaped to expect. When strength is seen as a process rather than a possession, another detail begins to stand out, one that is often overlooked because it does not announce itself clearly. The body does not simply respond to large efforts. It is shaped by the small, repeated actions that fill most of the day. These actions rarely feel important on their own. They are easy to ignore because they do not create immediate fatigue or visible change. Yet over time, they form the background against which strength either remains present or slowly becomes distant. In earlier human settings, these small actions were unavoidable. Standing was not always supported by furniture that removed effort from the legs and hips. Sitting often involved the ground or low surfaces that required the body to control its position and then rise again without assistance. Walking was not limited to smooth, predictable paths, and the body had to adjust to surfaces that shifted underfoot. Carrying did not always follow the same pattern or use the same tools. Even rest could involve small adjustments, shifts in posture, or responses to temperature that kept the body engaged at a low level. None of these details were dramatic, but together they created a continuous layer of activity that supported the larger expressions of strength. The body did not have to prepare itself separately for effort, because it was already moving through a range of positions and loads. This background layer is much quieter in many modern environments. Chairs, flat surfaces, controlled temperatures, and devices that reduce the need for physical interaction all contribute to a life where the body can remain in a narrow set of positions for long periods. Movement still exists, but it is often simplified, repeated in the same form, or postponed until a chosen moment. Over time, this reduces the number of small corrections the body makes. Joints move through fewer angles, muscles are asked to stabilize less often, balance is challenged less frequently. The body becomes efficient at the patterns it uses most, but less practiced in the patterns it does not encounter. After 30, this difference can become more visible, not because something new has suddenly begun, but because the accumulation of reduced variation and reduced frequency reaches a point where it can be felt. A simple action that once required no thought may now require attention. A movement that once felt natural may now feel slightly unfamiliar. This does not mean the body has lost its fundamental ability. It means the background that once supported that ability has become thinner. Strength, in this sense, is not only about peak performance, it is also about how much of the day quietly prepares the body for that performance. In the longer human timeline, preparation was built into life itself. There was no clear boundary between training and living. The body was always practicing, even when it was not aware of doing so. In contrast, modern life often separates these two. Training becomes a specific activity, while the rest of the day becomes physically quiet. This separation can create the impression that strength must be created in isolated moments and then somehow preserved between them. But preservation without continuous signal is not how the body tends to operate. It responds to what is repeated. It adjusts to what is common. It reduces what is rare. After 30, the effect of this pattern may feel like a slow fading. The body still remembers what strength feels like, but it is less often placed in situations that keep that feeling active throughout the day. From the perspective of human origins, this is not a failure of the body. It is a reflection of how closely the body has always followed the structure of its environment. When the small, constant demands that once surrounded it are reduced, the process that maintains strength becomes less active. What remains is a body that still holds the capacity for strength, but no longer carries it as an everyday condition. The disappearance of unavoidable movement may be one of the most important changes in the way the body experiences life after 30. It is easy to say that people move less now, but that phrase is too simple. The deeper change is that movement has become negotiable. It can be delayed, skipped, shortened, replaced, or concentrated into a chosen hour. For much of human history, many movements could not be negotiated in the same way. The body had to cross ground to reach food, water, shelter, tools, people, or safety. It had to rise, carry, bend, balance, pull, push, and adjust because ordinary life required these actions before comfort could begin. This does not mean every past life was the same, or that every person moved constantly. Human societies were varied, and their daily work changed across climates, landscapes, and forms of living. But the broad human pattern was different from the modern one. Movement was built into necessity. It was not always a separate decision. That difference matters because the body responds very differently to movement that is optional and movement that is unavoidable. Optional movement can be abandoned when time is short, when the weather is poor, when tiredness appears, or when life becomes busy. Unavoidable movement remains part of the day even when the mind does not feel motivated. In earlier environments, this gave the body a steady minimum of physical demand. The person did not have to want movement for the body to receive it. The world required it. After 30, when many people begin to notice that strength no longer stays with them easily, the loss of this unavoidable layer becomes important. The body may still be capable of strength, but it no longer receives the same daily proof that strength is needed. A modern person can often complete a day with very little full body effort. Floors are flat. Transport carries distance. Machines move weight. Chairs reduce the need to hold posture. Food arrives through systems that hide the physical work behind it. Water comes from a tap instead of a distance that must be crossed. Heat and shelter are maintained by buildings rather than by constant gathering, repairing, or adjusting. These protections are real achievements, and they have spared human beings from many dangers. Yet they also remove the ordinary physical demands that once kept the body involved before a person even thought about strength. In the long human past, walking was not exercise in the modern sense. It was the background condition of reaching what life required. Carrying was not a special training method. It was part of moving useful things from one place to another. Rising from the ground was not a mobility practice. It was simply how bodies moved between rest and action in many settings. These movements carried information. They told the body which muscles, joints, and patterns still mattered. When they disappear from daily life, the body does not receive an announcement. It simply receives less demand. The change is quiet enough that years can pass before the result becomes clear. After 30, This quietness may be felt as a sudden personal shift, but it is often the outcome of a long reduction in unavoidable use. The body has not been asked to keep the same readiness, so readiness becomes more fragile. Strength that once would have been supported by daily necessity now depends more heavily on deliberate choice. This is a difficult arrangement because choice is inconsistent. A person may choose movement one week and lose it the next. Life may interrupt. Work may take over. Fatigue may persuade the body to remain still. In contrast, necessity once returned regardless of preference. It created repetition without needing a plan. From the perspective of human origins, the modern problem is not simply weakness. It is the removal of the daily floor beneath strength. The body once stood on a base of required movement, a base made from walking, carrying, balancing, rising, and adjusting to the material world. When that base is removed, strength after 30 has to hang in the air, supported mostly by intention. And intention, unlike necessity, does not always arrive every morning. When movement becomes optional, another change follows quietly, one that is less about how much the body moves and more about how often it must decide to move. In earlier human settings, many actions did not pass through a layer of decision. A person did not weigh whether to walk a certain distance or whether to carry what was needed. These actions were part of the path between one state and another. They connected hunger to food, cold to warmth, distance to arrival. Because they were embedded in necessity, they did not depend on mood, energy preference, or time management in the same way they often do now. This matters because the body responds not only to movement itself, but to the reliability of movement. When movement arrives regularly, even in small amounts, the body begins to expect it. Systems that support strength, coordination, and balance remain engaged because they are repeatedly called upon. When movement becomes irregular, dependent on choice, the pattern changes. There may be days with effort, followed by days without. There may be short periods of intense activity, surrounded by long periods of stillness. Over time, this irregularity can weaken the connection between the body and its physical capacities. The body is still capable, but it is less certain about when that capacity will be needed. After 30, this uncertainty can become more noticeable. The body may respond well when movement is chosen, but it may not hold that response in a stable way between those moments. This can create a feeling that strength is temporary, something that appears during activity and fades soon after. The modern structure of time contributes to this pattern. Days are often organized around tasks that require attention, but not full body engagement. Work may involve long periods of sitting, standing in place, or using only the hands and eyes. Movement is then added as a separate activity, often compressed into a limited period. This structure divides the day into segments where the body is either mostly inactive or briefly active. The transition between these segments can feel abrupt, and the body has less opportunity to remain gently engaged across time. In earlier human environments, time was less sharply divided in this way. Physical actions were distributed through different parts of the day, often in response to changing needs rather than fixed schedules. This created a continuity that supported the body without requiring deliberate planning. The body did not have to remember to move, because movement was already part of what needed to happen. Another effect of optional movement is that it can become tied to motivation. When movement depends on motivation, it becomes vulnerable to fatigue, distraction, and competing demands. A person may intend to move, but choose not to when energy is low or when other tasks feel more urgent. This is not a failure of discipline. It reflects the fact that the environment no longer requires the body to act in the same way. In contrast, unavoidable movement does not depend on motivation in the same way. It occurs because the situation demands it. This difference changes the consistency of physical signals the body receives. Over long periods, consistency matters more than intensity. The body adapts to what happens most often, not only to what happens at the highest level. When movement is inconsistent, the signals that maintain strength become less stable. After 30, this can contribute to the feeling that the body no longer holds on to strength as it once did. The capacity may still be there, but the pattern that kept it active has become less reliable. From the perspective of human origins, this shift highlights how closely the body follows the structure of daily life. It does not maintain abilities simply because they were once useful. It maintains them when they continue to be used in a regular and meaningful way. When the structure of life changes so that movement becomes optional and irregular, the body adjusts to that structure. Strength does not disappear in a single moment. It becomes less anchored to the day. Without a steady place in the rhythm of life, it is experienced as something that comes and goes, rather than something that quietly remains. The deeper loss caused by optional movement is not only physical, it also changes the way the body understands necessity. A body surrounded by unavoidable movement receives a steady message that strength belongs to ordinary life. A body surrounded by convenience receives a different message. It learns that many distances do not need to be crossed by the legs, that many weights do not need to be carried by the hands, that many postures do not need to be entered or left without support. Slowly, the body builds its expectations around this easier world. This is not a flaw in the body, it is one of its most useful qualities. The body saves energy when energy is not required. It reduces readiness when readiness is not repeatedly tested. It becomes skilled at the life it actually lives. The problem after 30 is that the mind may still want the old feeling of strength, while the body has spent years learning a new pattern of reduced necessity. This can create a strange conflict. A person may feel that strength should still be there because nothing dramatic has happened. There has been no sudden break, no clear moment of loss, no obvious reason why the body should feel less dependable. But the body has been keeping a quiet record. It has noticed how often the legs are allowed to rest instead of walk, how often the back is supported instead of required to hold, how often the hands guide machines instead of handling weight, how often the ground is made smooth enough that balance is rarely challenged. These records are not stored as memories in the ordinary sense. They are written into habits of tissue, coordination, posture, and energy use. In the longer human past, necessity gave the body fewer opportunities to forget these patterns. A path had to be crossed whether the body felt prepared or not. A shelter had to be repaired, a child carried, a tool moved, a fire tended, a slope climbed, a load balanced. These examples should not be treated as one universal picture of all human life, because human groups lived in many different ways. But they point toward a broad truth. For most of human history, daily life gave the body a minimum level of required participation. That minimum mattered. It was not heroic. It was not extreme. It was simply enough to keep strength tied to the day. Modern life can lower that minimum so far that strength becomes detached from ordinary existence. It must be added back by intention, and intention is fragile because it belongs to attention, mood, schedule, and belief. Necessity belongs to the world. It returns even when the mind is tired. This is why the disappearance of unavoidable movement can feel especially strong after 30. By that age, many people have lived long enough inside modern patterns for the body to adapt deeply to them. The change is no longer just a missed walk or a quiet week. It becomes a long training in stillness, support, smoothness, and avoidance of load. The body follows that training with patience. It becomes less ready for the full range of movements that once belonged to human life. Then, when a demand appears, the difference is felt. A heavy object, a steep stair, a long walk, a low seat, an awkward carry, or a sudden need for balance can reveal how much of the old background has faded. The body may still answer, but the answer may come with more effort, more caution, and more recovery. This is not a final verdict on aging. It is a sign of a changed relationship. Strength after 30 becomes harder to keep when the world no longer forces small acts of strength into the day. The body still listens for necessity, but the modern environment often speaks in a softer voice. And when that voice stays soft for years, strength does not vanish loudly. It simply stops being treated as something the body must keep close. Not all movement is the same, and the body has never responded only to how much it moves. It also responds to how movement changes, how it shifts from one form to another, how it arrives without warning, and how it requires the body to solve small problems in real time. This kind of irregular demand once shaped a large part of human strength. A person did not move in a perfectly repeated pattern. The ground could change from firm to loose, from level to sloped, from dry to wet. A load could be heavier on one side than the other, or it could shift as it was carried. A path could narrow, widen, rise, or descend in ways that required constant adjustment. Even simple tasks could contain variation because the materials involved were not uniform. Wood, stone, water, plants, tools, and surfaces all carried differences that the body had to read and respond to. These variations created a form of strength that was not only about producing force, but about adapting that force to changing conditions. After 30, when many people begin to feel that their strength is less reliable, part of the change may come from the disappearance of this irregular demand. Modern environments often favor repetition and predictability. Movements are repeated in controlled settings, objects are designed to be handled in standard ways, and surfaces are made consistent to reduce risk. This stability can make life safer and more efficient, but it also reduces the number of unexpected adjustments the body must make. When movement becomes regular and predictable, the body becomes very good at that specific pattern, but less prepared for variation. Strength narrows into familiar pathways, and the broader capacity to respond to change becomes less practiced. This narrowing does not always appear during routine activity. It becomes more noticeable when something falls outside the usual pattern. A slight imbalance, an uneven step, an awkward reach, or a shifting load can feel more difficult than expected. The body still has strength, but it may not distribute that strength as easily across unfamiliar situations. In earlier human contexts, these unfamiliar situations were part of daily life. They were not occasional challenges. They were woven into ordinary movement. The body did not have the option to avoid them, so it remained practiced in adjusting. This constant need to adapt may have helped keep strength connected to a wider range of movements, even as the body aged. The effect of this pattern is not limited to muscles. It includes joints, tendons, balance, coordination, and the timing between different parts of the body. When these systems are regularly asked to adjust, they maintain a kind of readiness that does not rely on perfect conditions. When they are not, they become more dependent on stability. After 30, this difference can feel like a loss of confidence in movement. The body may hesitate slightly, not because it is weak, but because it is less certain. It has been trained in environments where variation is minimized, and when variation appears, it must relearn how to respond. From the perspective of human origins, irregular demand was not an extra challenge added to life. It was part of the structure of the environment. The body developed in conditions where predictability was limited, and this shaped how strength was expressed. Strength was not only the ability to do something under ideal conditions, it was the ability to adjust when conditions were not ideal. Modern life, by reducing irregular demand, changes this expression. It allows strength to exist in controlled situations, but offers fewer opportunities to maintain the broader adaptability that once supported it. After 30, the absence of this adaptability can make strength feel less dependable, not because it has disappeared, but because it is no longer practiced across the same range of conditions that once kept it close to everyday life. Irregular demand matters because it teaches the body to connect strength with judgment. A repeated movement in a predictable setting can train force, but it does not always train the same quiet decision-making that happens when the surface, weight, angle, or timing changes. The body has to decide how much force to use, where to place weight, how quickly to react, how to protect a joint, and how to share effort between the legs, back, hands, and breath. Much of this happens below conscious awareness. A foot senses the ground before the mind names it. A hand adjusts its grip before the object slips. The trunk stiffens or softens depending on the load. The eyes scan ahead while the body prepares for what may come next. In older human environments, this constant physical judgment was part of daily existence. It did not require a special place or a planned routine. It emerged because the world was made of irregular things. Paths were not uniform. Loads were not balanced like modern tools. Resting places were not always level. Weather changed how surfaces felt, how far the body could move, and how much effort was required to do ordinary tasks. These conditions did not make people invincible, and they often brought real danger, pain, and wear. But they did keep the body involved in a wider kind of strength, one that combined force with awareness, balance, and adjustment. After 30, the loss of this wider demand can become especially noticeable because the body may still produce effort, yet feel less intelligent in unfamiliar movement. This is one of the reasons strength can feel different from simple power. A person might still be able to push or pull in a straight line, yet feel uncertain stepping down from an uneven edge, carrying something awkward, twisting while holding weight, or standing up from a low position without support. The weakness is not always in one muscle. It may be in the relationship between systems that have not been asked to work together often enough. Modern life can separate these systems. The legs may walk mostly on flat ground. The hands may repeat small controlled motions. The back may be held by chairs for long hours. The eyes may face screens more often than distant terrain. The feet may be enclosed and protected from texture. Each system still functions, but the old conversation between them becomes quieter. In the longer human past, that conversation was difficult to avoid. Moving through a landscape required the body to combine perception and strength again and again. A load carried from one place to another was not only heavy, it shifted, pressed, rubbed, or changed balance. A path was not only distance, it was texture, slope, obstacle, and uncertainty. The body was taught by these small physical problems. It learned not only to be strong, but to use strength with timing. When those lessons fade from daily life, the body may begin to rely on controlled conditions. After 30, this reliance can make ordinary surprises feel larger than they are. A sudden awkward movement may leave soreness. A small imbalance may feel alarming. A task that should be simple may require more attention than expected. This can be mistaken for a clear sign that the body is simply becoming old, but it may also be the result of living for years in spaces that have removed too many small challenges. The body becomes less practiced in correction because there is less to correct. It becomes less practiced in awkward strength because fewer objects are awkward. It becomes less practiced in uneven balance because the ground has been made obedient. From the perspective of human origins, this is a profound change. The body still carries systems shaped for a variable world, yet many modern surroundings present a narrowed world, one where strength is asked to appear under clean, controlled conditions and then somehow remain ready for everything else. The result is a quiet fragility of coordination. Strength may still exist, but it is no longer surrounded by the irregular lessons that once taught it how to move through uncertainty. After 30, that missing education can be felt in the hesitation before action, in the carefulness around movement, and in the strange sense that the body has become less sure of itself, even before it has truly run out of power. The loss of irregular demand changes the body in a way that can be difficult to notice because it does not always reduce strength evenly. Instead, it reduces the body's range of confidence. A person may still feel capable in familiar movements, yet less certain when the situation becomes slightly unusual. This difference is important. Strength in a controlled pattern can remain, while strength in a changing pattern fades. The body may still walk well on flat ground, yet feel less steady on stones, mud, grass, stairs, slopes, or a dark path. It may still lift a familiar object, yet hesitate when the object is awkward, uneven, or carried at an angle. It may still move through daily routines, yet feel surprised by soreness when the movement asks for a twist, a reach, a low bend, or a quick correction. These moments can feel like proof that age has begun taking strength away, but they may also reveal something more specific. The body has lost practice in dealing with change. In the long human past, change was not rare enough to be surprising. The environment kept interrupting the body with small differences. A path was not a perfect line. A load was not always balanced. A place to sit or sleep was not always soft, level, or raised. The body had to keep adjusting its force, posture, and timing because the world kept changing the question. This kind of training did not make human bodies free from pain or decline. It often produced wear, injuries, and fatigue, but it also kept strength connected to many forms of response. The body did not only learn how to be forceful, it learned how to be useful under imperfect conditions. Modern surroundings often remove those imperfect conditions before the body has to answer them. This is one of the hidden gifts of comfort, but it is also one of its hidden costs. The safer and smoother the environment becomes, the less often the body needs to solve small physical problems. Over time, the systems that once worked together across varied situations may become less integrated. The feet receive less texture, The ankles receive fewer angles. The hips receive fewer deep positions. The hands handle fewer irregular materials. The spine is supported more often than challenged. The eyes and balance systems are asked to manage less natural uncertainty. After 30, the effect of this long smoothing can become more visible because the body has had years to specialize in a narrowed world. It can still perform what the narrowed world asks, but it may struggle when the older world briefly returns. A broken sidewalk, a heavy bag, a slippery surface, a low seat, a long walk, or an uneven trail can suddenly feel like a reminder of a language the body has not spoken often. From the perspective of human origins, this is central to the question of why you cannot stay strong after 30. Strength was never only a straight line of power. It was a living relationship with varied ground, shifting weight, changing weather, uncertain distance, and objects that did not fit the hand perfectly. When that relationship weakens, strength becomes more delicate. It may remain inside controlled routines, but it no longer spreads as easily into the rest of life. This creates a strange modern condition. The body can be protected from danger while also losing some of the everyday adaptability that protection no longer requires. It can be safer and less prepared at the same time. That paradox should not be turned into a rejection of comfort or technology. Human beings have always tried to reduce pain, risk, and unnecessary labor. The point is quieter than that. The body still responds to the world it meets. If the world becomes smooth, repetitive, and predictable, the body learns smoothness, repetition, and prediction. If the world once asked for adjustment, balance, and flexible strength, then removing those demands changes what strength feels like. After 30, the result may not be a sudden fall from youth into weakness, but a gradual narrowing of physical readiness until the body still has strength, yet cannot carry it confidently into every shape the world might take. There is a quieter change that becomes easier to notice after 30, one that does not come from a single movement or a single day, but from the way the body begins to manage its own energy. The human body does not repair and maintain itself in a fixed, unchanging way. It adjusts the balance between effort and recovery depending on what it experiences. When physical demand is frequent and varied, the body receives a steady message that repair is necessary to keep functioning. When demand becomes lighter, more predictable, or less constant, the body may begin to shift its priorities. This shift does not happen suddenly, and it is not something a person can feel directly at first. It is gradual, built over time, shaped by the signals the body has been receiving for years. After 30, the result can appear as a slower return to readiness. A movement that once required little recovery may now leave a longer trace. A day of effort may carry into the next day in a way that feels unfamiliar. This is often described as the beginning of aging, as if the body has simply reduced its ability to repair. But repair does not exist apart from use. It responds to what the body is asked to maintain. In earlier human settings, the need to repair was rarely optional. The body was regularly placed in situations where it had to continue moving, lifting, balancing, and adapting. This did not make recovery easy or painless. It often involved fatigue, soreness, and injury, but it kept the systems of repair closely tied to daily function. The body had reason to maintain those systems because it was repeatedly called upon to use them. When the environment becomes quieter, the signals that guide repair can become quieter as well. The body is not failing to repair. It may be adjusting the intensity and timing of repair to match what it perceives as necessary. This is a subtle difference, but it changes how strength is experienced. After 30, a person may still have the ability to become strong, but the process of returning to that strength may feel slower or less automatic. This can create the impression that something has been lost, when in fact something has been rebalanced. The body is managing its resources in a way that reflects the life it is living. In modern environments, long periods of low demand can signal that high readiness is not required all the time. The body may become more conservative, less inclined to maintain constant preparedness for effort that rarely appears. This does not mean the body cannot respond when needed. It means the response may take longer to rebuild, and it may fade more quickly when not used again. From the perspective of human origins, this pattern is understandable. Energy has always been valuable, and maintaining systems at a high level without regular use would have carried a cost. A body that reduces unnecessary effort can conserve energy for other functions. When demand increases again, the body can adapt upward, but that adaptation depends on repeated signals, not a single moment of effort. After 30, this becomes more noticeable because the balance between use and rest has often shifted over many years. The body has learned from that pattern. It has adjusted its expectations about how often it needs to repair for strength, how quickly it needs to recover, and how much readiness it must hold between periods of effort. The result is not a simple decline, but a different rhythm. Strength becomes more closely tied to recent use. Recovery becomes more dependent on repeated engagement. The sense of being continuously strong gives way to a sense of being conditionally strong. This change can feel like the body is moving away from its former self, but it may also be the body continuing to do what it has always done, responding to the world it inhabits. As this shift in the body's internal rhythm continues, another subtle change begins to take shape, one that is closely tied to how the body decides what is worth maintaining. The human body does not treat all of its capacities equally at all times. It constantly evaluates, in a quiet and unconscious way, which functions are being used often enough to remain ready, and which can be reduced without immediate consequence. This evaluation is not precise in a conscious sense, but it is consistent in its direction. What is repeated becomes familiar. What is familiar becomes efficient. What is efficient is easier to maintain. After 30, many people begin to notice that certain abilities feel less immediate, even if they have not been completely lost. This may not be because the body has suddenly lost the ability to perform those actions, but because it has quietly reduced the priority given to them. In earlier human environments, the range of actions that needed to be maintained was often broader. Movement across different surfaces, handling objects of varying shapes and weights, adjusting posture throughout the day, and responding to changing conditions all required the body to keep multiple systems engaged. The body could not easily reduce its attention to these capacities because they were repeatedly called upon. Even if one type of movement was used more than another, the overall pattern remained varied enough to keep a wider set of abilities active. Modern environments can narrow this range. Daily tasks may rely on a smaller set of repeated movements, often performed in similar positions and conditions. The body becomes efficient at these specific patterns, but it may reduce its readiness for movements that are rarely used. After 30, this narrowing can become more visible because the body has had enough time to adapt to the patterns it experiences most frequently. An action that once felt natural may now feel unfamiliar, not because it has been forgotten, but because it has not been practiced often enough to remain immediate. This creates a particular kind of sensation, one where the body seems to hesitate before certain movements. The hesitation is not always due to weakness in the usual sense. It may be a form of caution, a sign that the body is less certain about how to organize itself for the task. This uncertainty can slow movement, reduce confidence, and increase the feeling of effort. Over time, this can be interpreted as a steady loss of strength, when it may actually reflect a reduction in the range of actions the body is prepared to perform without preparation. From the perspective of human origins, this process aligns with how living systems tend to operate. The body does not maintain every possible capacity at the same level indefinitely. It maintains what is required often enough to justify the effort. When the environment changes in a way that reduces the need for certain actions, the body adjusts. It does not remove these capacities entirely, but it allows them to become less immediate. After 30, this adjustment can feel more pronounced because the body's patterns have been shaped over a longer period of time. The habits of movement, posture, and effort have become more established, and changes in those habits are felt more clearly. This is why the experience of strength can become more conditional. The body may still respond well within familiar patterns, but it may require more time or effort to respond outside of them. The sense of being broadly capable gives way to a sense of being selectively capable. This does not mean the body is failing. It means the body is becoming more closely aligned with the specific life it is living. The question of why strength cannot be easily maintained after 30 therefore begins to include this narrowing of priority. The body is still capable of many things, but it is not being asked to maintain all of them equally. As a result, some capacities remain close to the surface, while others move further away, not gone, but less ready to appear without being called back through repeated use. There is a quiet threshold where the body's priorities begin to feel visible not because they suddenly change in one moment, but because their long adjustments finally reach the surface of daily life. After 30, many people notice that strength no longer behaves like a constant companion. It may return with use, but it does not always remain without use. It may answer when called, but it may not wait close by in the same way. This can feel like a betrayal, especially when the mind still carries a younger image of the body, an image formed during years when recovery seemed quicker and unused abilities seemed easier to reclaim. Yet the body has never been a fixed archive of everything it once did. It is a living system that updates itself according to repetition, demand, and need. The capacities that remain most available are usually the ones that continue to receive clear signals. The capacities that receive fewer signals drift farther from immediate access. In this sense, the body after 30 may not be losing strength as much as revealing the true cost of years spent without enough varied demand. In the longer human past, this cost was less likely to remain hidden for so long because the environment kept testing the body in small ways. A person who needed to walk across uneven ground, carry useful objects, rise from low positions, respond to cold, and work with changing materials could not easily let wide ranges of movement fall silent. The world kept reminding the body of what mattered. Those reminders were not gentle in every case, and they did not prevent injury, pain, or aging, but they gave the body frequent reasons to keep many systems awake. Modern life often gives a different message. It may protect the body from danger while also reducing the number of daily reasons to remain broadly prepared. The result is a body that becomes efficient, but efficient for a narrower world. This is why strength after 30 can feel strangely selective. One familiar task may still be easy, while another, only slightly different, feels unexpectedly heavy. A person may manage routine work, yet feel surprised by a long walk, a low chair, an awkward bag, a sudden climb, or a day spent outside in changing weather. These moments reveal the difference between stored memory and active readiness. The body may remember the pattern, but memory is not the same as preparation. Preparation requires recent, repeated contact with the demand itself. From the perspective of human origins, this is not a failure of character. It is the body following an ancient economy. It does not keep every door open with equal effort when the world only knocks on a few. It keeps close what is used and lets other capacities move into the background. After 30, the background becomes harder to ignore because the body's margin feels smaller. Movements that once returned quickly may need more time. Recovery that once seemed automatic may need clearer signals. Strength that once felt general may now appear only in the specific places where life has continued to ask for it. This creates a modern confusion. People may think the body is simply leaving strength behind, when it may actually be matching strength to a reduced environment. The old human body expected a world that kept asking questions of the feet, hands, spine, breath, balance, and attention. The modern world often asks fewer of those questions, and asks them less evenly, so the body becomes quieter in the areas that are no longer questioned. What appears after 30 is therefore not a single decline, but the exposure of a long negotiation between biology and daily life. The body still listens, still adjusts, still protects energy, and still responds to repeated use. But if the surrounding world no longer keeps strength woven into ordinary hours, the body has little reason to hold every form of strength near the surface. It waits for demand, and in the waiting, some of its old readiness becomes distant. Bones offer a quieter kind of evidence than stories, and they are useful because they do not need to remember themselves as strong. They simply carry marks left by living. When archaeologists study human remains from different periods, they often look at patterns of wear, muscle attachment, joint change, healed injury, and bone structure to understand how bodies were used. These traces do not give a complete biography, and they should not be turned into simple claims about every person in the past. A bone cannot tell us exactly how someone felt after 30, how tired they were, or what they believed about their own strength. But bones can show that human bodies were often shaped by repeated physical demand over long periods of life. They can show that movement was not a temporary stage of youth. They can show that bodies carried evidence of work, travel, posture, load, stress, and adaptation. This matters because the modern fear after 30 often assumes that useful strength naturally belongs only to the earlier years of adulthood. The archaeological record complicates that assumption. In many past populations, adult bodies show signs that physical effort continued well beyond the first stage of maturity. Joints could be worn, teeth could be damaged from uses beyond eating in some groups, bones could heal after injury, muscle attachment areas could reflect repeated loading. None of this means that people were healthier in every way, or that the past should be imagined as a world of perfect endurance. Quite the opposite. These traces often reveal hardship, strain, and vulnerability, but they also reveal continuity. The body was not simply protected from use after youth. It was used because life still required it. The evidence is important because it moves the question away from fantasy. We do not need to imagine ancient people as stronger than modern people in every way. We only need to notice that their bodies were commonly embedded in physical tasks that left marks across time. In the long human story, strength was not always clean, young, or untouched. It could be scarred, worn, adapted, and still necessary. A person beyond 30 might not have had the fresh capacity of early adulthood, but the body could still be part of the physical structure of daily life. This is different from many modern experiences, where strength after 30 is often treated as something that must be recovered from outside ordinary routine. The bones suggest another view. Bodies are shaped by what they repeatedly do, and when repeated demand continues, the body carries the record of that continuation. This does not mean we can read the past with certainty. Archaeological traces are uneven, and different environments preserve remains differently. Social roles, diet, disease, violence, climate, and culture all shape bodies in complex ways. But even with these limits, the material record reminds us that aging bodies were not separate from the world around them. They were pressed by it, supported by it, damaged by it, and trained by it. After 30, the modern body may feel weakness more sharply because it has fewer ordinary pressures leaving such a record. Its bones and joints may still adapt, but often to narrower patterns. Long sitting, repeated small motions, smooth walking surfaces, supported posture, and occasional concentrated effort. The contrast is not between a strong past and a weak present, it is between different kinds of use. Earlier bodies often carried signs of broad, unavoidable participation in physical life. Modern bodies may carry signs of protection, repetition, stillness, and specialization. From the perspective of human origins, the bones remind us that strength was never separate from the conditions that marked the body. It was not merely an inner quality. It was written gradually into tissue by the world itself, through pressure, repair, wear, and use. When that writing becomes lighter, narrower, or more repetitive, the feeling of strength after 30 also changes. The body still records life, but the life being recorded is no longer the same. Archaeological traces also remind us that strength was never distributed evenly across all human lives. Bodies were shaped by sex, age, task, landscape, diet, disease, social role, and accident. Some people carried heavy loads often. Some spent long periods making tools, processing food, tending children, preparing materials, or moving through difficult terrain. Some bodies were marked by repetitive work. Others were marked by injury, malnutrition, infection, or early death. This variety matters because it protects the story from becoming too simple. The past does not tell us that every human body remains strong after 30. It tells us something more careful and more useful. Bodies tend to preserve the marks of the lives they are required to live. When a life requires repeated physical participation, the body records that participation in its own structure. When a life reduces certain demands, the body records that too. This is why bones and joints are important for the question of strength after 30. They do not give a romantic picture of ancient strength. They give a physical picture of adaptation. A skeleton can show that a joint was used in certain ways, that a muscle group may have been loaded repeatedly, that an injury healed and the person lived on afterward, or that teeth and bones carried signs of stress. These signs do not prove a single daily routine, but they show that the body was not floating outside its environment. It was being shaped by repeated contact with work, movement, and survival. In many historical and prehistoric settings, Adults beyond early youth likely remain tied to the physical demands of their group, though the form of that participation could change with age, experience, and social role. Older adults may have contributed through knowledge, care, making, planning, teaching, gathering, or lighter but still necessary work. This is important because strength after 30 does not have to mean the same strength as early adulthood. It may become more practiced, more selective, more economical, and more tied to skill. A younger body may rely more on freshness and quick recovery. A body that has lived longer may rely more on learned movement, careful timing, and knowledge of how not to waste effort. The archaeological record cannot tell us the inner feeling of this shift, but it can show that bodies were often used long enough to carry layered evidence of life. The contrast with modern life is not that modern people have no marks. They do. The body still records everything it repeatedly does. Long sitting can become part of posture. Repeated hand use can shape tension. Limited movement can narrow mobility. Smooth floors can reduce balance challenges. Protected temperatures can reduce ordinary exposure to cold and heat. The modern skeleton and soft tissues are still being written on, but the writing comes from a different world. After 30, this difference may begin to feel personal because the body's records have accumulated. It has spent years learning which positions are common, which movements are rare, which forms of effort appear often, and which have almost vanished. From the perspective of human origins, this is a powerful reminder. There is no pure body untouched by history. Every body is historical because every body is shaped by its surroundings over time. The body after 30 is not only older than it was at 20, it is also more deeply trained by the life it has actually lived. If that life has included wide movement, varied load, and regular physical problem solving, the body carries one kind of record. If it has included long stillness, supported posture, and narrow repeated motions, it carries another. Bones, joints, and tissues do not judge these lives, they simply adapt to them. This is why the feeling of weakness after 30 should not be understood as a single natural sentence written by age alone. It is a record, built slowly, of what the body has been asked to do, what it has not been asked to do, and what parts of its older human inheritance have been left mostly unused. The most careful lesson from Bones is not that the past was stronger, but that the body is always being shaped by the world that uses it. This lesson is valuable because it keeps the question after 30 from becoming too simple. It prevents us from saying that modern people are weak only because they are older, and it also prevents us from saying that earlier humans were strong in some perfect, untouched way. Bodies have always worn down, joints have always carried stress. Teeth, bones, and connective tissues have always recorded hardship, repetition, injury, and repair. But the pattern of those marks tells us that strength was historically tied to participation. The body did not stand outside life, waiting to decline by itself. It was pressed into shape by what life required. When a person walked across difficult ground for many years, the body learned that ground. When hands processed materials, held tools, carried loads, or repeated skilled work, the body learned those tasks. When knees, hips, spine, and shoulders entered many positions across the day, the body preserved some memory of that range through use. This does not mean the body became immune to aging. It means aging happened inside a continuing exchange with the environment. That exchange is what many modern bodies no longer receive in the same broad form. After 30, the difference can begin to feel like a private loss, but the archaeological view makes it less private. It shows that every adult body is a record of conditions. The body that feels weaker after 30 is not only carrying years, it is carrying the shape of those years. It is carrying how much it walked, how often it lifted, how often it balanced, how often it crouched or rose, how often it felt temperature, how often it solved physical problems without machines smoothing the answer. In the deeper human past, many of these experiences were built into survival. In the modern world, many of them are optional, reduced, or replaced. The result is not one sudden break between a strong past and a weak present. It is a gradual change in what the body is asked to record. A skeleton from an earlier population might show heavy use, healed damage, or patterns of repeated activity. A modern body may show different patterns: support, stillness, narrow repetition, limited range, or occasional intense effort separated from long quiet hours. Both are historical records. Both are true to their worlds. The important point is that the body does not remain neutral between these worlds. It adapts to each one. This helps explain why 30 can feel different now. By that age, the body has had enough time to become loyal to its daily environment. If that environment has been broad, varied, and physically demanding, the body may carry one kind of readiness. If that environment has been smooth, supported, and physically narrow, the body may carry another. The number 30 alone does not explain the feeling. The life leading into 30 explains much of what the body is ready to do afterward. From this angle, the archaeological traces become a quiet warning, but not a dramatic one. They remind us that strength is not a decorative quality placed on top of the body. It is written into the body by repeated contact with the world. If the contact changes, the writing changes. If the world stops asking for balance, balance becomes less practiced. If the world stops asking for load, load becomes less familiar. If the world stops asking for varied movement, movement becomes narrower. After 30, these absences may become easier to feel because the body has spent many years receiving them as instructions. What seems like decline may partly be the body revealing the history it has been living. The bones of the past do not give us a simple answer, and they should not be forced to do so. They offer something slower and more useful, a reminder that the human body has always belonged to its surroundings. It grows older, but it also grows into the conditions around it. And when those conditions no longer resemble the older world that shaped our species, strength after 30 may begin to feel like something the body remembers from its origins, but no longer receives enough reason to keep close. The modern timeline of weakness often begins long before it is noticed. It does not usually begin on the day a person turns 30. It begins earlier, in the gradual arrangement of daily life around comfort, speed, sitting, smooth surfaces, and reduced physical necessity. For many people, the body reaches 30 after years of being protected from the older pressures that once shaped human strength. Distance has been shortened by transport. Weight has been moved by machines. Food has been separated from the labor of finding, carrying, preparing, and sometimes waiting for it. Temperature has been made more stable. Floors have been made flatter. Rest has been raised from the ground into chairs, couches, and beds. These changes are not failures. They are part of human progress, and they have reduced suffering in real ways. But they also create a different timeline for the body. Instead of strength being reinforced quietly across the day, the body may spend years receiving the message that broad physical readiness is not required. After 30, the result can feel sudden because the body only becomes noticeably different once enough of these small reductions have accumulated. The person may ask why strength is leaving now, when the deeper answer may be that the body has been adapting for a long time. In the deeper human past, physical demand often began early and remained woven into adult life. Children learned landscapes through movement. Young adults entered the tasks and responsibilities of their group. Adults beyond 30 often continue to participate physically, though in different ways depending on culture, health, skill, and role. This does not mean ancient lives were healthier or more fair. Many were marked by danger, illness, injury, and early loss, but the timeline of physical use was different. The body was less likely to pass through years of near silence before being asked to remain strong. It was shaped continuously by the material world. Modern life often reverses this pattern. A person can spend childhood and young adulthood in environments where movement is increasingly narrowed, then reach the 30s expecting the body to behave as if it had lived under older conditions. This creates a mismatch between memory and preparation. The mind remembers youth as effortless, but youth often hides weakness because recovery is faster and reserves are larger. The body can tolerate periods of disuse more easily when it is younger. After 30, the same patterns become harder to ignore. Long sitting leaves a stronger mark. Repeated narrow movements create more noticeable stiffness. Lack of load becomes more apparent when lifting is suddenly required. Lack of uneven ground becomes more obvious when balance is challenged. The modern timeline therefore creates the illusion that decline begins after 30, when in many cases the visible feeling begins after years of reduced demand. This distinction is important because it keeps the question honest. Age does matter. Adult bodies change over time, and no environment can completely prevent that. But the feeling of not staying strong after 30 is not explained by age alone. It is shaped by the life that has been building inside the body before 30 arrives. The modern world can delay discomfort by making life easier, but it cannot erase the body's need for repeated signals. When those signals are missing, the body adapts to their absence. It becomes suited to a life of support, convenience, and intermittent effort. Then, when the body is asked for older forms of strength, the request feels heavier than expected. From the perspective of human origins, this is a strange reversal. Earlier environments were often harsh enough that weakness was exposed quickly. Modern environments can hide the narrowing of strength for years. They soften the consequences until the body reaches a point where the difference becomes difficult to overlook. After 30, what appears as a new problem may actually be the first clear report from a body that has spent a long time living without the daily pressures that once kept strength ordinary. Modern weakness often feels personal because it appears inside one body, one morning, one movement, one surprising hesitation. Yet the pattern belongs to a much larger historical shift in how time is organized. Human beings did not only change their tools, shelters, and food systems, they changed the physical calendar of the body. In many older ways of living, effort was spread through ordinary hours because the day itself required it. Morning might begin with movement, not because movement was chosen for health, but because fire, water, food, animals, tools, fields, paths, or other people demanded attention. The body received many small calls before the mind could separate them into categories. There was no clean line between physical work and the rest of life. The day carried the body through different postures, distances, surfaces, loads, and temperatures, and this distribution helped keep strength connected to time. Modern life often rearranges that calendar. Physical demand may shrink into isolated blocks, while many other hours become still, supported, and repetitive. This is not simply less movement. It is a different paying of movement. The body spends long periods receiving almost no broad physical demand, then may be asked to produce force quickly, recover quickly, and remain confident. After 30, this pacing becomes harder to ignore because the body has been shaped by the calendar it has lived. A long day of sitting does not disappear just because an hour of exercise appears at the end of it. A week of narrow movement is not erased by one demanding task. The body counts repetition more patiently than intention. It listens to the average shape of life. In the deeper human past, the average shape of life was often more physically varied, even when it was not heroic or extreme. A body might walk because distance existed, bend because the ground held useful things, carry because materials had to move, and rest in positions that did not completely remove muscular participation. These were not special acts of strength. They were time itself passing through the body. In modern settings, time can pass without asking much from the body at all. Hours can be spent with the legs still, the spine supported, the hands repeating small motions, and the eyes fixed at a short distance. The body adapts to this because adaptation is what it does. It does not protest in words. It simply becomes more suited to the repeated condition. After 30, when strength feels more difficult to keep, the body may be revealing the history of its hours. The problem is not only that some strong movements have disappeared, it is that the weak signals have become frequent enough to form a training of their own. Stillness trains the body too. Support trains the body. Smoothness trains the body. Repetition trains the body. They train it toward lower readiness for the kinds of varied effort that once belonged to human life. This is why the modern timeline can be misleading. It may look as if weakness arrives with age, but age is moving through a schedule that has already taught the body what not to maintain. The human body once aged inside days filled with small demands that returned again and again. Many modern bodies age inside days where demand is delayed, softened, and concentrated. The difference accumulates quietly until it becomes a feeling. The body is still alive, still capable, still responsive, but strength no longer seems to travel with it through the entire day. From the perspective of human origins, this matters because the body was shaped in a world where time was rarely empty of physical meaning. Even waiting, resting, or watching could involve ground, weather, balance, and posture. Modern time can become weightless for the body, passing through screens and schedules while muscles and joints receive very little news from the world. After enough years, that silence begins to sound like age. The modern timeline of weakness becomes most visible when a person asks the body for something older than the life it has recently lived. A long walk on uneven ground, a day spent carrying bags, a low seat that requires the legs and hips to rise without help, a cold morning that makes the body tense, or a simple task that combines bending, twisting, and lifting can suddenly reveal a gap. The movement itself may not be extreme. What makes it feel difficult is that it belongs to a broader human pattern that has not been practiced often enough. For many years, the body may have lived inside a narrowed routine, supported by chairs, carried by transport, protected by buildings, and guided through smooth spaces. Then one ordinary demand arrives from the older world, and the body answers slowly. This moment can feel like proof that 30 has opened a door into decline. But the deeper story is more gradual. The body is not only reacting to that one task, it is reporting on the years that came before it. In the long human past, the body was more often introduced to difficulty in small daily portions. This does not mean life was better, safer, or more desirable. It means the body did not usually wait many years before meeting ground, load, weather, distance, and posture as real physical conditions. Those conditions returned often enough to keep strength connected to ordinary time. A body beyond 30 was still shaped by years of physical contact with the world, and that contact gave strength a kind of continuity. In modern life, the opposite can happen. The body may be spared many small demands, and that protection may hide the cost for a long time. Youth can make this cost less visible because the younger body often recovers quickly, compensates easily, and tolerates inconsistency. A person can sit too long, move too little, avoid load, and still feel mostly unchanged for a while. After 30, the same habits may no longer stay hidden. The body begins to reveal what it has adapted to. If it has adapted to stillness, stillness becomes easier than movement. If it has adapted to support, unsupported posture feels heavier. If it has adapted to predictable surfaces, uneven ground requires more attention. If it has adapted to short bursts of effort, long distributed work feels unfamiliar. This is not a moral judgment. It is the ordinary honesty of biology. The body becomes good at what it repeats, and less prepared for what it rarely meets. From the perspective of human origins, this is why the modern timeline is so misleading. Weakness seems to begin after 30 because that is when the body often stops hiding the results of a physically quiet life. But the preparation for that feeling may have begun much earlier, in the way days were arranged, in the way movement became optional, in the way effort was compressed, in the way comfort reduced small acts of strength before they could become part of the body's background. The result is not a single event, but an accumulation of absence. No one day removes balance. No one chair removes hip strength. No one vehicle removes endurance. No one warm room changes the body's relationship with effort. But repeated over years, these small removals become a new environment, and the body learns that environment faithfully. After 30, when strength seems harder to keep, what is being felt may be the delayed shape of that learning. The body still carries older human possibilities, but it does not maintain them without reason. It waits for repeated signals, for daily proof that strength still belongs to life. If those signals arrive rarely, strength moves further from the surface. The modern timeline of weakness is therefore not just a countdown of age. It is a record of how long the body has lived without the steady physical questions that once kept human strength close, ordinary, and continually renewed. Strength without purpose does not remain close to the surface for very long. The body may still hold the potential for force, balance, endurance, and recovery, but potential is not the same as readiness. Readiness depends on being called into use often enough for the body to treat it as necessary. In earlier human environments, strength had many purposes that were not separate from living. It helped a person cross distance, move useful things, climb, descend, rise from the ground, manage tools, hold children, gather materials, and respond to weather or terrain. These purposes were not always dramatic. Most of them were ordinary, repeated, and practical. Their importance came from the fact that they returned again and again. The body did not need to ask whether strength mattered. The day answered that question through the ground, the load, the shelter, the fire, the path, and the work of remaining alive. In many modern environments, the purpose of strength becomes less obvious. A person may still want to be strong, but daily life may not require strength in a consistent way. Wanting and requiring are different signals. Wanting belongs to the mind, requiring belongs to the world. The body listens more deeply to what is required. If strength is desired but rarely needed, it may become more like an aspiration than a condition of living. After 30, this difference can become painful, because the body begins to reveal which capacities have been supported by daily purpose and which have only been preserved in memory. A person may remember feeling naturally strong, but that earlier feeling may have depended on a world that asked more from the body without negotiation. The modern world often asks for attention, speed, decision, and endurance of a mental kind, while asking less from the whole body. This creates a strange imbalance. The mind may be tired, but the body may be underused. The day may feel heavy, but the muscles, joints, feet, and balance systems may have received only a narrow set of signals. Strength then loses its ordinary place. It is no longer woven into the purpose of each hour. It must be added back as a separate project, and when it is separated, it becomes easier to lose. From the perspective of human origins, this is a major shift. The body was shaped in a world where purpose was physical before it was abstract. To reach something, the body moved. To keep warm, the body gathered and adjusted. To eat, the body often participated in distance, preparation, and material work. To care for others, the body lifted, carried, watched, followed, and stayed near. Strength belonged to relationships, landscapes, and repeated needs. It was not only a personal quality, it was a way the body remained useful to life around it. When modern life removes many of those physical purposes, the body does not necessarily understand strength as something worth holding at the same level. It has no reason to keep every form of readiness close if the day rarely asks for it. After 30, this can feel like the body is abandoning the person, but it may be more accurate to say that purpose has been removed from the body's ordinary world. Without purpose, strength becomes easier to postpone. It can wait until tomorrow, until there is time, until there is motivation, until the body already feels better. But strength that waits too long becomes less immediate. It fades from the background and must be called back with effort. This is why the loss feels quiet rather than sudden. There is no single moment when purpose disappears. It is removed through convenience, through replacement, through tools that do the carrying, through systems that shorten distance, through surfaces that remove balance, through routines that let the body pass through hours without being needed. The body adapts to that absence, and after 30, the absence begins to speak more clearly. Strength remains possible, but without a daily purpose, it no longer remains near. A body that no longer has a clear physical purpose does not immediately become weak. It becomes uncertain about what should remain ready. This uncertainty is quiet, because the body does not ask questions in words. It only responds to repeated conditions. If the day repeatedly asks for sitting, the body becomes better at sitting. If the day repeatedly asks for short walks across flat ground, the body becomes better at that narrow pattern. If the day asks mostly for mental focus, screen attention, and supported posture, the body learns that these are the main requirements of life. Strength may still be desired, but desire does not leave the same mark as necessity. The older human body was shaped in conditions where purpose often came from outside the self. A path had to be walked because something was needed beyond it. A weight had to be moved because it belonged somewhere else. A shelter had to be made, repaired, entered, left, warmed, or shared. Tools and materials had to be handled because they connected the body to food, protection, and care. These actions were not always intense, and they were not always healthy in a modern sense, but they gave strength a place in the day. They told the body that force, balance, grip, endurance, and coordination still mattered. After 30, when modern strength begins to feel harder to keep, one reason may be that the body has been living with fewer such instructions. It has not been told, often enough, that strength is part of ordinary survival. It has been told that strength is optional, symbolic, scheduled, or postponed. This changes the emotional meaning of the body. A person may feel guilty for losing strength, as if the loss came only from poor willpower. But from a broader historical view, willpower was never the main engine that kept human bodies active. Necessity carried much of the burden. The environment gave movement a reason before the person had to invent one. In modern life, that burden moves inward. The individual must create purpose where the world no longer provides it. The body must be asked deliberately to do what the older world asked automatically. This is a difficult change, because internal purpose is less stable than external requirement. It can be interrupted by work, fatigue, worry, weather, family, mood, or the simple softness of convenience. The body notices the interruptions more than the intentions. It adapts to what actually happens, not to what someone hopes will happen. Over years, this means strength can lose its continuity. It may be present during occasional effort, but absent from the spaces between efforts. It may return when the body is used, then fade again when the reason disappears. From the perspective of human origins, this fading is not mysterious. A living body is economical. It does not hold every expensive capacity at a high level without recurring evidence that the capacity is needed. Strength costs energy. Readiness costs maintenance. Broad coordination costs. Practice. If the environment no longer demands these things often, the body reduces their priority. After 30, this reduction becomes more noticeable because there has been enough time for the body to believe the quieter pattern. The person may still live a full life, but the body may be full in ways that do not require broad strength. Days can be crowded with responsibility while physically narrow. A mind can be exhausted while the legs, hips, back, hands, and balance receive too little meaningful work. This contrast is one of the modern tensions hidden behind the question of why strength cannot be kept after 30. The body is not empty of effort. It is often carrying a different kind of effort, one that does not maintain the same old physical capacities. In the older human story, purpose and strength were more tightly bound. The body was needed by the world around it. In the modern story, the body may be protected from needs so thoroughly that strength has to search for a reason to stay close. When that reason is weak, irregular, or too far apart, strength does not leave in anger. It simply steps back, waiting for a purpose strong enough to call it forward again. The loss of physical purpose changes the meaning of strength, because it separates strength from belonging. In the older human world, the body belonged to the tasks around it. It belonged to the path, the shelter, the fire, the tools, the gathering place, the carried child, the prepared food, the seasonal movement, and the shared work of staying alive. Strength was not only something a person possessed, it was a way the body remained connected to the needs around it. A hand that could grip had a reason, a back that could carry had a reason, legs that could travel distance had a reason. Balance, endurance, and coordination were not private achievements. They were part of how the body continued to take part in the world. Modern life often weakens this connection without making it obvious. The body may still be present, but many of its old purposes have been transferred outward. Machines carry weight. Roads and vehicles shorten distance. Buildings protect temperature. Furniture holds posture. Systems deliver food, water, light, heat, and tools without asking the body to participate in the same broad way. These changes are not wrong. They are the result of human intelligence trying to reduce hardship, but they also leave the body in a strange position. It is safer, yet less needed. It is protected, yet less called upon. After 30, this can begin to feel like a quiet fading, because the body has spent years learning that many forms of strength no longer have a daily role. The strength that once belonged to necessity now has to belong to choice, identity, or memory. That is a fragile place for strength to live. Choice can weaken. Identity can shift. Memory can hold an image of the body that the day itself no longer supports. In the longer human timeline, strength was renewed because life kept returning to the body with physical questions. Can you rise from the ground? Can you carry what must be moved? Can you cross the distance? No. Can you keep balance when the surface changes? Can you continue when the weather is not arranged for comfort? These questions did not make the past better or kinder, but they gave the body repeated reasons to remain involved. When those reasons are removed, the body adapts to a life where its participation is narrower. This is why strength after 30 may feel different even when a person still cares about being strong. Caring is not the same as being required. A person may want strength, but if daily life does not repeatedly use the legs, hands, spine, lungs, and balance in varied ways, the body receives a weaker instruction than the mind intends. Over time, the body becomes loyal to the instruction it receives most often. It becomes loyal to the chair, the smooth floor, the short path, the supported back, the controlled room, the lifted burden that is lifted by something else. The result is not instant weakness. It is distance. Strength moves farther from ordinary life. It no longer waits at the edge of every hour. It waits somewhere deeper, still possible, but less immediate. From the perspective of human origins, this is one of the clearest reasons why strength becomes harder to keep after 30. The body was not shaped to preserve unused strength for symbolic reasons. It was shaped to answer repeated need. When need disappears, the answer becomes quieter. The body does not hate comfort, and it does not punish the person for living in a safer world. It simply follows the pattern placed before it. If the world asks less, the body often keeps less ready. If the world asks narrowly, the body prepares narrowly. If the world stops giving strength a purpose, strength begins to lose its place in the daily order of life. What appears after 30 is not only aging, and not only weakness. It is the body revealing that strength was always tied to use, need, and participation, and that without a living purpose, even a capable body may stop carrying strength close to the surface. The idea of decline after 30 becomes more misleading when it is seen only through the body of one person. A single body feels change as personal, but that body is also standing inside a chain of generations. Each generation inherits not only genes, but a way of living, a built environment, a pattern of work, a relationship with food, distance, temperature, tools, and rest. The body that reaches 30 today has not simply lived 30 years. It has lived 30 years inside a world already shaped by many earlier choices to reduce physical necessity. Roads were smoothed before it walked on them. Chairs were common before it sat in them. Food systems were organized before it learned hunger. Vehicles were waiting before it understood distance. Buildings were heated, cooled, lit, and sealed before the body had to ask what weather demanded. In this way, modern weakness is not only an individual story, it is a generational story. The body after 30 is not merely adapting to one quiet day or one quiet year. It may be adapting to a culture that has spent many generations moving effort away from the body and into systems around it. This does not mean that people today are lazy, or that earlier people were pure models of strength. That would be too simple and untrue. Human beings have always tried to reduce pain, danger, hunger, cold and unnecessary labor. The desire for comfort is not a modern mistake. It is part of human intelligence. But over time, when many forms of hardship are reduced, the body begins life in a different classroom. A child grows up with fewer unavoidable loads, fewer natural surfaces, fewer reasons to squat, climb, carry, brace, walk far, or adjust to weather. By the time that child becomes an adult, the body has already learned a narrower physical language. By the time it reaches 30, that language may feel normal, even if it is very different from the broader language that shaped most of human history. This generational view helps explain why strength after 30 can seem harder to keep now than people expect. The body is not only losing something with age, it may never have been asked to build the same wide base in the first place. Earlier human bodies were not automatically stronger in every way, and they were often exposed to dangers modern people are fortunate to avoid. But many of them entered adulthood through lives that demanded more regular physical participation. Modern bodies can enter adulthood through years of support, smoothness, and reduced necessity, then feel surprised when strength after 30 does not stay close. From the perspective of human origins, this is a major shift in the conditions of development. The body begins receiving modern signals before it can choose them. It learns convenience as the ordinary shape of the world. It learns that distance can be shortened, that posture can be held by furniture, that food can arrive without travel, that cold can be blocked, that the ground can be made flat, that many tasks can be done while sitting still. These lessons are repeated so early and so often that they become invisible. After 30, when weakness appears, the person may blame only the present moment, but the body is revealing a longer inheritance. It is showing the effect of growing up in a world where many old physical questions were answered before the body had to answer them itself. This does not create a final judgment. It creates a quieter understanding. Strength fades more easily when each generation receives fewer ordinary reasons to maintain it. The loss is not only in the adult years. It begins in the physical assumptions a life is built upon, long before 30 arrives. And by the time the body notices the change, the pattern has already been repeated for years. A generational loss of physical demand is difficult to see because each generation treats its own surroundings as normal. A raised chair, a smooth floor, a warm room, a short ride, a soft bed, a packaged meal, and a task completed through a screen do not feel like historical changes while they are being used. They feel like ordinary life. Yet each of these ordinary comforts changes the body's education. The body learns from the world before it learns from explanation. It learns how often the hips must open, how often the knees must fold, how often the hands must grip uneven materials, how often the feet must read the ground, how often the back must hold itself without support, and how often effort must be spread across the day. When a generation grows up with fewer of these requirements, it may enter adulthood with a narrower base of physical familiarity. After 30, the effects of that narrower base can feel like decline, but the story began much earlier. It began in the spaces where the body was protected before it was challenged. This is not a criticism of protection. Many protections are among the greatest achievements of human life. Less hunger, less exposure, safer shelter, cleaner water, and reduced physical danger have allowed many people to live longer, learn more, and suffer less. The point is not that hardship was good. The point is that the body cannot receive the benefits of comfort without also adapting to the absence of older demands. In earlier human environments, children and young adults often learned strength through participation rather than instruction. They watched, followed, carried small things, moved across ground, handled materials, and gradually joined the physical rhythms around them. The form of this participation varied widely, and it was not always safe or fair, but it placed the developing body inside a world that asked many questions of movement. Modern childhood and early adulthood can be different. The body may spend more years in seated learning, controlled spaces, transported distance, and repeated narrow motions. By the time adulthood arrives, the body may already have accepted stillness as a basic condition. By 30, it has had many years to deepen that acceptance. This generational pattern also changes what people expect strength to feel like. If a person grows up in a world where movement is mostly chosen, then strength may seem like an individual project. It becomes something to build, schedule, measure, and preserve. In a world where movement is woven into necessity, strength is less separate from life. It does not need as much explanation because the day itself keeps explaining it. This difference shapes the mind as well as the body. A modern person may feel surprised, even ashamed, when strength fades, because the culture often frames strength as personal responsibility. But the body has been trained by a wider system. It has been trained by architecture, transport, furniture, work, food supply, temperature control, and the design of ordinary time. From the perspective of human origins, this means that weakness after 30 is not only a private failure of maintenance, it is the visible edge of a long historical redesign of daily life. Each generation inherits a world that has already removed some physical questions from the day. Then that generation removes more, often for good reasons, and passes on an even quieter environment to the next. The body follows this quietness faithfully. It becomes adapted to the demands that remain, and less prepared for the demands that disappear. After 30, when the body begins to feel less strong, it may be carrying not just its own years, but the softened physical assumptions of the world that raised it. The older human body was shaped by repeated contact with necessity. The modern body is often shaped by repeated contact with convenience. Both are forms of training. One keeps strength close through use. The other allows strength to drift unless it is deliberately called back. The generational story of strength is quiet because it does not feel like inheritance while it is happening. A person does not wake up and feel the weight of roads, furniture, transport, heating, machines, schools, screens, and food systems as part of the body. These things seem outside the skin, yet they shape the body from the beginning. They decide how often the legs travel distance, how often the hands handle weight, how often the spine supports itself, how often the feet meet uneven ground, how often cold or heat asks for adjustment, and how often daily life requires effort before comfort arrives. By the time a person reaches 30, the body has already been educated by this world for many years. It has learned what is common and what is rare. It has learned which movements belong to ordinary time and which movements appear only as special effort. This is why weakness after 30 can feel so strange. The body is not only responding to age, it is responding to the physical lessons it has inherited from the world that raised it. In the long human past, each generation also inherited a world, but that world often kept the body closer to necessity. Children grew into landscapes, materials, temperatures, distances, and social tasks that required bodily participation. They learned strength not as an abstract value, but as a way of joining life. They learned where to step, how to carry, how to wait, how to endure small discomforts, how to use posture, grip, balance, and attention in ordinary surroundings. This does not mean that earlier lives were better, stronger, or more complete. They were often dangerous, painful, unequal, and uncertain, but they gave the body a wider range of physical questions. Modern generations inherit fewer of those questions. This is a real achievement in terms of safety and comfort, but it also means the body may reach adulthood with less practice in the older forms of readiness. After 30, when recovery feels slower, balance feels narrower, and strength feels less steady, the body may be revealing the absence of that earlier education. It may be showing what happens when several layers of convenience have removed the need to remain physically prepared across the whole day. The loss is not dramatic, because each change seems small. A child sits a little longer. A journey becomes a ride. A load is carried by a cart, a vehicle, or a machine. A floor becomes smooth. A room becomes warmer. A task becomes digital. A meal arrives without much movement. None of these changes alone explains the feeling of weakness. Together, repeated across years and generations, they form a new physical habitat. The body belongs to that habitat as surely as earlier bodies belong to forests, plains, coasts, fields, villages, workshops, and rough paths. From the perspective of human origins, this means the question after 30 is not only what time has taken, it is also what the modern world never asked the body to build deeply enough. A generation that inherits less physical necessity may also inherit a thinner base of everyday strength. Not because people are weaker in character, and not because comfort is morally wrong, but because the body develops through use, and use depends on the shape of life. After 30, the body begins to show the truth of that shape. It shows whether strength has been woven into daily hours, or separated into occasional effort. It shows whether movement has been broad or narrow. It shows whether the older human inheritance of distance, load, balance, and adjustment has been kept alive or allowed to fall quiet. The generational loss is therefore not a single fall from a stronger past. It is a slow redesign of the human day, and when the day changes for long enough, the body that grows inside it changes too. By the time the question reaches its final depth, it is no longer only about why strength becomes harder to keep after 30. It becomes a question about distance. Not the distance between youth and age, but the distance between the body's older expectations and the world it now inhabits. The human body still carries patterns shaped across a long history of movement, load, weather, hunger, terrain, rest, recovery, and repeated usefulness. It still responds to use and disuse. It still saves energy when demand is low. It still strengthens what is repeated, and lets unused capacities drift farther away. These are not mistakes. They are part of the body's intelligence. The difficulty is that this intelligence was shaped in conditions where the world gave the body frequent physical reasons to remain ready. Modern life has changed many of those reasons. It has made the body safer, warmer, more protected, and often longer lived, but it has also made the body less necessary in the daily handling of the material world. This creates a quiet gap. On one side of the gap is a body built to adapt to pressure. On the other side is a life designed to remove pressure wherever possible. After 30, that gap becomes easier to feel because the body has had enough time to adapt to the removed pressure. It has learned the chair, the smooth floor, the short path, the controlled room, the carried load that is carried by something else. It has learned that many old questions no longer arrive. How far must the legs go today? How much must the hands carry? How often must the hips fold and rise? How often must the feet read uneven ground? How often must the body respond to cold, fatigue, distance, and awkwardness? In earlier human worlds, these questions were not philosophical. They were ordinary. They were asked by the ground, by the day, by the work of food and shelter, by children and elders, by materials, paths, seasons, and the need to continue. The body did not need to invent a reason to stay involved. Life supplied one. In modern worlds, many of these questions become optional, and optional things are easier to lose. The body waits for repeated proof that broad strength still matters. If proof comes rarely, readiness becomes rare as well. This does not mean that the body has failed after 30. It means the body has remained faithful to its oldest rule: adapt to the life that is actually being lived. The painful part is that the mind may want one life from the body while giving it another. It may want the strength of a body that walks, carries, balances, rises, endures, and recovers through the day, while the actual day asks mostly for stillness, attention, support, and narrow repetition. The body cannot live on the image alone. It listens to the hours. It listens to the surfaces beneath the feet, the posture held most often, the loads that appear or disappear, the distance travelled by muscle or machine, the temperature met by skin or blocked by walls. Over years, these signals become more powerful than memory. After 30, the result may feel like a decline, but it is also a record. It is the body showing the difference between what it was shaped to expect and what it has been given. From the perspective of human origins, this gap is not a reason for shame. It is a reason for clarity. Strength was never a fixed gift that time simply stole. It was a relationship, renewed through contact with the world. When the contact changes, the relationship changes. The body still belongs to history, but it now lives in a world that often hides history from the skin, the bones, the muscles, and the breath. And in that hidden space, the question becomes quieter, slower, and more difficult than a simple story of getting older. When this distance is allowed to remain unexamined, it slowly becomes part of how a person understands their own body. Strength begins to feel like something that belonged to an earlier version of the self, something that was present before life became more structured, more contained, more efficient. The change is not always recognized as a shift in environment. It is often experienced as a quiet personal loss. A person may say that their body has changed, that it no longer responds as it once did, that it has become slower, less reliable, more difficult to maintain. These statements are not wrong, but they describe the result without always revealing the full cause. The body has indeed changed, but it has changed inside a world that has also been changing, often in ways that remove the very conditions that once kept strength close. This is why the experience after 30 can feel confusing. There is no clear event to point to. No single moment explains why a movement feels different, why recovery takes longer, or why strength seems to fade between uses. The body does not mark the transition with a visible line. It simply continues to adapt, responding to the patterns it receives. Over time, those patterns form a kind of silent instruction. If the instruction emphasizes stillness, support, and repetition, the body becomes skilled in those areas. If it rarely emphasizes load, variation, balance, and distributed effort, the body becomes less prepared to express them. The result is not a dramatic failure. It is a gradual narrowing of readiness. From the perspective of human origins, this narrowing is not unusual. The body has always been selective in what it maintains. It does not hold every possible capacity at the same level indefinitely. It keeps what is necessary and reduces what is not. What is unusual is the modern pattern of necessity itself. For most of human history, necessity included a broad range of physical demands. Today, necessity can exist with very little full-body involvement. A person can live, work, communicate, learn, and rest while asking relatively little from the larger systems of movement. This creates a life that is full in many ways, yet physically quiet in others. After 30, the quiet becomes more noticeable because the body has had enough time to believe it. It has learned that many forms of readiness are not required often enough to remain close. It has adjusted its priorities accordingly. This adjustment does not prevent strength from returning when called upon. The body is still capable of adaptation. It can still respond to repeated use, still rebuild patterns, still adjust to new demands. But the difference lies in how naturally strength remains present between those moments. In earlier human environments, strength was supported by the background of life itself. It did not have to be constantly reintroduced. In modern environments, that background is thinner. Strength must be invited back into the body, and without continuous invitation, it becomes easier for it to drift. This drifting is what many people feel after 30. It is not only the passing of time, it is the absence of a world that once kept strength woven into ordinary hours. When that world is no longer present, the body does not hold on to strength out of memory alone. It responds to what is real, to what repeats, to what is required. The quiet truth is that strength has not simply been taken away. It has been left without enough reason to remain constantly near. Perhaps the most honest way to understand strength after 30 is not to ask why the body has betrayed us, but to ask what kind of world the body has been living in. The body is not separate from its days. It is not separate from the ground it does or does not walk across, the weight it does or does not carry, the postures it does or does not enter, the cold it does or does not feel, the distance it does or does not cross. It is made from these repetitions as much as from age itself. In the long human past, strength was not a decoration added to life. It was part of participation. It was renewed through ordinary contact with a world that asked the body to be useful, alert, and responsive. That world was not gentle, and it should not be imagined as pure or better. It contained hunger, pain, danger, infection, loss, and many forms of hardship modern people are fortunate to avoid. But it also kept the body in conversation with necessity. It did not let strength become only an idea. It gave strength a place to go. Modern life has done something extraordinary and complicated. It has protected the body from many old dangers, while also removing many old reasons for the body to remain broadly prepared. This is the quiet paradox. A safer body can become a less ready body. A protected body can become a less practiced body. A body surrounded by comfort can still feel tired, but the tiredness may come from a life that exhausts attention while asking too little from the older systems of movement, balance, load, and recovery. After 30, this paradox becomes harder to ignore. The body has lived long enough inside its environment to show the shape of that environment. If its days have been narrow, the body may become narrow. If its movement has been rare, strength may become less immediate. If its effort has been separated from ordinary life, strength may become something that must be deliberately called back. This does not make the body broken. It makes the body honest. It has always responded to the world more faithfully than to the image we carry of ourselves. The message at the end of this question is not a command to reject comfort, or to imitate the past, or to believe that earlier human lives were healthier in some simple way. That would be false and too easy. The deeper value is to see the body with more patience. Weakness after 30 is not always a final sentence written by age. It may be a record of absence. It may be the body telling the truth about what has not been repeated, what has not been required, what has not been woven into the day. And if strength is a relationship rather than a possession, then its fading is not only loss, it is information. It shows where the relationship has become quiet. It shows where the body no longer hears the old questions from the world. Can you carry? Can you rise? Can you balance? Can you continue? Can you recover and return? These questions once came from landscape, weather, food, shelter, tools, family, and survival. Today, they may not arrive unless a person creates space for them, but even that thought should be held gently. The purpose is not to turn the body into a project of fear. It is to understand that the body is historical, responsive, and deeply shaped by ordinary life. After 30, strength may not stay simply because we remember having it. It stays when life continues to give it meaning. So, the final question remains open, quiet, and unfinished. If the human body still carries the memory of a world that kept it strong through use, What kind of life can help that memory remain alive without returning to the hardships that once created it?